Jay-Z has officially petitioned the court to dismiss the sexual assault lawsuit against him and also to impose sanctions upon the Texas attorney who has come after him. We're going to analyze the arguments and what can we expect next. Welcome to Sidebar presented.
Hey, so before we go any further on this, I have a big announcement for you guys. The video version of Sidebar is now available on Spotify. That's right. We are so thankful for your guys' support of Sidebar. Us getting this show on Spotify video is just truly due to how loyal this audience is. So thank you so much for that. And yes, you can now watch and listen on the go, from Diddy to the United Healthcare murder updates to crazy court moments. It is all on Spotify. So right now, you can scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description to follow Sidebar on Spotify.
Listen on the go, from Diddy to the United Healthcare murder updates to crazy court moments. It is all on Spotify. So right now you can scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description to follow Sidebar on Spotify. All right, we have another legal filing in the Jay-Z sexual assault case that we need to talk about. This is one that we've been following for quite some time, and we can't.
And she is claiming that when she was just 13 years old, she was raped by both of these musicians at a Video Music Awards after party back in 2000. And now Jay-Z, who is adamantly denying the allegations, is not only trying to get the whole case dismissed and thrown out, but he is also asking the court to impose sanctions upon Jane Doe's Texas attorney, Tony Buzbee. Now, this may sound very familiar, by the way, because this has been an ongoing legal war between Buzbee and Jay-Z and his legal team. Accusations that Buzbee engaged in extortion, that is
at a Video Music Awards after party back in 2000, and now Jay-Z, who is adamantly denying the allegations, is not only trying to get the whole case dismissed and thrown out, but he is also asking the court to impose sanctions upon Jane Doe's Texas attorney, Tony Buzbee. Now, this may sound very familiar, by the way, because this has been an ongoing legal war between Buzbee and Jay-Z and his legal team. Accusations.
Jay-Z says that when he refused, that is when he was named by Tony Buzbee in the lawsuit. Remember, this lawsuit first came out, it was only identified as unnamed celebrity A, and then in an amended complaint, Jay-Z was identified as celebrity A. So you're seeing this really bad blood between the different players here. I mean, it got so bad that the judge in this case, Judge Annalisa Torres, actually scolded Jay-Z's lawyer, Alex Spiro, writing in a recent order, "Carter's lawyer's relentless filing of combative motions containing inflammatory language and ad hominem attacks is inappropriate, a waste of judicial resources, and a tactic unlikely to benefit his client. The court will not fast-track the judicial process merely because counsel demands it."
Jay-Z says that when he refused, that is when he was named by Tony Buzbee in the lawsuit. Remember, this lawsuit first came out, it was only identified as unnamed celebrity A, and then in an amended complaint Jay-Z was identified as celebrity A. So you're seeing this really bad blood between the different players here. I mean, it got so bad that the judge in this case, Judge Annalisa Torres, actually scolded Jay-Z's lawyer Alex Spio, writing in order, "Carter's lawyer relentless filing of combative motions containing inflammatory language and ad hominem attacks is inappropriate, a waste of judicial resources."
And by the way, when we're talking about sanctions under Rule 11 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, we're talking about a way to punish attorneys for really bad conduct. Usually it's a monetary punishment. It's rare. It's rare. You don't see this all the time. You have to be talking about really egregious bad behavior. You know, Rule 11, it's about making false representations to the court, filing a lawsuit for an improper purpose, like merely to harass someone, that you're asserting claims or defenses that are not backed up by the facts, the law, the evidence. The bottom line here is that Rule 11 requires attorneys to conduct reasonable inquiries into the facts and into the law before they file. Makes sense, right? Well, Alex Spiro, Jay-Z's attorney, claims that Tony Buzbee violated Rule 11 by, quote, either knowingly making false allegations about Mr. Carter in the amended complaint, failing to conduct an adequate investigation into the complaint's factual allegations, or at a minimum, failing to withdraw the complaint once it became clear that numerous allegations in the complaint are false and the other allegations are therefore at least highly suspect.
Draw them because the federal rules and professional ethics require more of a filing attorney. Mr. Carter now respectfully seeks appropriate sanctions, and by the way, when we're talking about sanctions under Rule 11 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, we're talking about a way to punish attorneys for really bad conduct. Usually it's a monetary punishment. It's rare you don't see this all the time. You have to be talking about really egregious bad behavior, Rule 11, it's about making false representations to the court, filing a lawsuit for an improper purpose like
by Alex Spiro of Jay-Z at what appears to be a party with a lot of people. Later on in the memorandum, he writes, other photographs from that evening also show Mr. Combs with his then girlfriend, the musician and actress Jennifer Lopez, at two different establishments, Lotus and Twirl, neither of which was a large residence with a U-shaped driveway. And there is another photo that is included. This time it's of the pair, Jennifer Lopez, Shawn Combs, and there is a caption at the bottom that says that they are at a MTV Video Music Awards after party at Twirl on September 7th, 2000. But that is not the only alleged inconsistency. You see, Jane Doe has claimed in her complaint that she was able to escape this situation and run away to a nearby gas station, call her father to pick her up. Well, the filing says
allegations in the complaint are false and the other allegations are therefore at least highly suspect. So, what do they mean by these allegations are false? Well, here is where it gets a little tricky for Jane Doe, because NBC News actually interviewed her and they looked into this case. They looked into her claim.
Remember that? And I don't. I have a lot going on, but I mean, that's something that would definitely stick in my mind. Now, Spiro continues in this filing saying, paragraph 46 states that plaintiff spoke to celebrities at the alleged party, but when journalists pressed her as to which celebrity she spoke with, she named a person who was in Chicago that evening performing a concert. So Spiro explains a little bit more about this later on in the filing, where he writes, plaintiff also claimed with certainty that she spoke with musician Benji Madden at the alleged party about his tattoo, The Last Supper. She supposedly remembers this interaction with clarity because she has a religious background, so it was something to talk about. But Mr. Madden was not even in the state of New York. His representative told NBC that he did not attend the VMAs and in fact was on tour in the Midwest with his band Good Charlotte. Then, Spiro writes, paragraph 40 states that plaintiff watched the VMAs on a Jumbotron. In fact, photographs from that evening show there was no Jumbotron, as New York City had denied MTV a permit, and included also by Jay-Z's legal team.
Lotus and Twirl, neither of which was a large residence with a U-shaped driveway, and there was another photo that is included. This time it's of the pair Jennifer Lopez, Shawn Combs, and there is a caption at the bottom that says that they are at a MTV Video Music Awards after party at Twirl on September 7th, 2000, but that is not the only alleged inconsistency.
The area was cordoned off by police and inaccessible to fans. And included is another screenshot of that same video from YouTube of the exterior of the Radio City Music Hall where the VMAs was being held. And you see limousines outside with police appearing to be on each side, and there are barricades. Now, this accuser did concede to NBC that she has, quote, made some mistakes in her retelling of the story, but she stands by her account, saying you should always fight for what happened to you, you should always advocate for yourself and be a voice for yourself, you should never let what somebody else did ruin or run your life. I just hope I can give others the strength to come forward like I came forward. But obviously, Jay-Z and Spiro disagree, right? And they say in their memorandum, confronted with those glaring red flags, a competent and ethical attorney, again talking about Tony Buzbee, would have not only omitted the many erroneous allegations from the complaint, but also completed a thorough and careful vetting of the core assault allegation before affixing his or her signature to the complaint. Abiding by that ethical duty was especially important here, given the defamatory character of the assault allegation and the near certainty that the complaint would generate massive publicity in light of the identity of the defendant, inflicting irreparable reputational harm and forcing him to explain to his own children that he had been falsely accused of assaulting.
Tour in the Midwest with his band Good Charlotte. Then Spiro writes paragraph 40 states that plaintiff watched the VMAs on a Jumbotron. In fact, photographs from that evening show there was no Jumbotron, as New York City had denied MTV a permit, and included also by Jay-Z's legal team is a screenshot of what appears to be a video, so it's a still shot.
Call to her father, or a review of publicly available video footage and photos from that night at and after the VMAs, or a review of publicly available property records would have quickly revealed the implausibility of her allegations. But Mr. Buzbee has all but admitted that he declined to undertake such a basic investigation. When confronted by NBC News journalists with the series of false allegations in the complaint, Mr. Buzbee sought to cover for his utter lack of diligence by claiming his client would undergo a polygraph examination, an offer he seems to have abandoned since making it weeks ago. And he passed the buck, stating that another unnamed firm had vetted the allegations and that the Buzbee law firm would, quote, continue to vet claims and collect corroborating data to the extent it exists. So yes, that is true, based on the NBC reporting. He said that. And Jay-Z argues that's not adequate. That is, quote, entirely improper, and that it was Buzbee's job to conduct a factual investigation before he signed and filed this complaint, not afterwards. And Jay-Z and Alex Spiro double down on this, and they make the argument that if you look at how Tony Buzbee has conducted himself since Combs was arrested and indicted, it shows that Tony Buzbee hasn't been doing his proper due diligence. Why do they say that? Because after that happened, after Shawn Combs was arrested and indicted, they say that Buzbee apparently published a 1-800 hotline number for potential plaintiffs to sue Shawn Combs for abuse. And they say just 2 weeks later, he holds this press conference where he claimed that more than 3,000 people had contacted him through the hotline, and that he claimed he was representing 120 plaintiffs who wanted to bring lawsuits against Shawn Combs. That is true. He did hold that presser. We covered this on prior sidebars. But they argue, quote, that sequence alone strongly suggests that Mr. Buzbee's vetting of claims was grossly deficient. Even assuming Mr. Buzbee set up the hotline on the same day that Mr. Combs' indictment was unsealed, the sheer number of calls that Mr. Buzbee allegedly received within the 2 weeks between the unsealing and the October 1st press release indicates that Mr. Buzbee could not possibly have vetted every caller's allegations to the extent necessary to establish the veracity before signing up 120 of them as plaintiffs. But within weeks of his press conference and in an apparent rush to be the first attorney to get claims on file against Mr. Combs, Mr. Buzbee filed 15 lawsuits on behalf of individuals who contacted him via the hotline in this court alone. So the basic argument was that Buzbee didn't properly vet these claims, that he appears to not even spoken to the accuser's father, which would have been a simple thing to do. And when he started to see cracks in this case, he should have withdrawn the complaint. And they argue that he is not engaging in his ethical responsibilities. And they even go so far as to suggest that maybe that is why he has not obtained temporary admission to practice law in this court, the Southern District of New York, for this case. Because in the law we call that pro hoc vice. That's where you're temporarily admitted to try a case in a jurisdiction that you're not otherwise admitted to. We talked about this previously on another episode of Sidebar because he was defending himself, Tony Buzbee, in a prior filing. And he was basically saying, look, I'm not trying to avoid being sanctioned. I'm not trying to avoid the court having authority over me to avoid being sanctioned. And he wrote, I am a member of the State Bar of New York and am admitted to the Eastern District of New York. I intend to apply for reciprocal admission to the Southern District. Again, that's where this case is being held. The fact that I have signed pleadings and letters filed in this court does not reflect any attempt by me to evade responsibility for anything. However, Jay-Z and his legal team, they write here in this filing that Buzbee, quote, has not even sought interim admission pro hoc vice while his application is pending, despite signing more filings over the ensuing weeks. Whether that reflects an improper effort to avoid the jurisdiction of this court or just a failure to act with anything approaching reasonable diligence, it reinforces the propriety of imposing sanctions here. So Spiro doubles down and tries to reassure the court that what Buzbee is accused of here, these Rule 11 violations he says that he has committed, that they are extreme, that this isn't levying, quote, irrelevant ad hominem attacks against Tony Buzbee. Now that is seemingly in reference to what I mentioned before, where the judge had chastised Alex Spiro for what he was saying about Tony Buzbee. They're saying it goes beyond this. This is not just personal ad hominem attacks or anything like this. And they even claim that Tony Buzbee is a repeat offender. So Alex Spiro writes, on October 14th, 2024, he, meaning Tony Buzbee, filed a different complaint on behalf of an anonymous John Doe against Mr. Combs that has also contained easily disprovable allegations. For example, that complaint asserted that John Doe had never been married, but CNN reported the contrary. He was married, and his marriage purportedly ended after the alleged assault. That is information that any attorney could obtain during an introductory meeting with his client by simply asking questions about his marital history or how the alleged assault impacted his life. The complaint also asserted that Doe was assaulted in 2006 in the Hamptons at Mr. Combs' white party. But again, CNN revealed that the white party was held in Saint-Tropez in 2006 and in the Hamptons in 2007, something Mr. Buzbee could have learned through a simple Google search. So let me just take a quick pause here to talk about this, because a counter-argument for Tony Buzbee to fight against this, I imagine, could be none of these inconsistencies in Jane Doe's account or John Doe's account make the story not true. With respect to Jane Doe, yeah, there may be details that are wrong, but isn't that natural? We're talking about something that happened 24 years ago. Well, now 25 years ago, but 24 years ago when she filed the complaint. And if the allegations are true, a victim of sexual assault could have recall issues given the trauma of that event, especially the age that she was at or allegedly at.
Indicates that Mr. Buzbee could not possibly have vetted every caller's allegations to the extent necessary to establish the veracity before signing up 120 of them as plaintiffs, but within weeks of his press conference and in an apparent rush to be the first attorney to get claims on file against Mr. Combs. Mr. Buzbee,
whether the claims have a reasonable factual basis, not to leave a fundamentally defective and defamatory complaint on the docket while Mr. Buzbee does the work he should have done before he commenced suit. And Spiro also cites case law from this appellate court decision in support of sanctions. It's called the Levine case. And he writes, there, the court upheld sanctions where subsequent deposition testimony from both the plaintiff and one of the defendants revealed that statements in the pleadings and other filings were provably false. In so doing, the Second Circuit credited the district court's conclusions that the complaint's allegations were not well grounded in fact, and that plaintiff's counsel had ignored facts revealed through reasonable inquiry and perpetuated his misconduct through the filing of numerous memoranda well after his errors were revealed to him. That is precisely what Mr. Buzbee has done here. The court should come to the same conclusion as the Second Circuit in Levine. Now, this is a good argument, but at the same time, we don't know exactly what the facts were in Levine. Could be kind of different with what we're dealing with here. I'm sure when Tony Buzbee responds, he will address that case as well. But just going to one final thing that Alex Spiro writes in this filing. It's important because he writes, the nature of the allegations here warrant sanctions. This is not a contract dispute or a patent case. This is an allegation of child rape. To sign a pleading accusing someone of such a horrific crime without adequately vetting the allegation, particularly when the defendant's prominence means that the allegation will be repeated in headlines across the world, is deeply wrong and unethical. If lawyers do not face consequences for such a cavalier effort to destroy another person's reputation and inflict emotional harm on his loved ones, that tactic will proliferate. Now, I am sure, as I mentioned, we will see a response, a legal response from Tony Buzbee. It may mirror some of the arguments that he made from a prior filing, where he argued that Rule 11 sanctions based on just questions that are raised from one NBC interview, that's not warranted, especially when we're talking about just typical disputes that happen in every case. Of course, witnesses may have different recollections of events than a plaintiff or a defendant. That's why we have trials. That's not enough reason to withdraw a complaint or sanction an attorney. So I imagine we will see something like that, but let's see what happens next in this very, very, very ugly legal war. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.